Well, this is a first. I was about halfway through recording footage for this video when a fan translation for this game dropped. As far as I can tell, the person behind it's reputable, and they state they did not use machine translation in any part of it, so it's probably pretty good. So that's nice. All my footage is going to be in Japanese though, because I started before that came out. But hey, that means you can play this one if you want. Thanks for putting in the work, Chapu. Now, the game itself. If you've watched any of my prior videos, you probably know I have an appreciation for odd, atmospheric, and stylistically distinct games, and a heavy tolerance for jank. Prisoner checks all of these boxes. It's a game I had stumbled into simply while digging for weird unknown PS1 games, and Prisoner is certainly one that draws the eye. Its very box art is mysterious, to say the least. Nothing but the game's title and some vague imagery of the stars and some faces of the characters we'll presumably be seeing on this journey. A lot of implication, very little to explicitly grasp. There's very little English documentation of this game online at all, really, and even in Japan it doesn't seem to be a particularly big name. Some old gameplay videos, some old promotional flyers being auctioned off on Yahoo, but as a whole, the game seems to be a bit of an unknown. No particular fame or infamy attached. So, how about we try and crack this game's little aura of mystery? This game was published by Mainichi Communications, a pretty big Japanese business conglomerate that briefly dabbled in video game publishing, primarily with board games and adventure games. Prisoner is the most oddball title in their lineup, created by Fakecraft, who seem to have gotten go-ahead to make it thanks to previously creating Himitsu Sentai Metamor V for Micom, which, well, that's a video game. It's not a lot, but Prisoner makes an interesting impression right off the bat with its title screen alone. Not much going on, but it has a pretty imposing aura with the music and the fuzzy blue background. Not many options to futz with, so there's not much to do but jump right into the game itself, upon which we get a little CG cutscene introducing the setting, which, as you might notice is a trend for the game, provides very vague scraps of information as it flies us into the intro at the settlement of Golden Dawn. Here we are introduced to our hero, a very young boy named Fry, caring for his bedridden father, Gurnak, who's been suffering from a deathly illness for the past few months. His father works as a farmer raising something called Aliola, but with his recent illness, Fry's taken up most of the duties raising their crops. Stopping his father from getting out of bed to go check the crops out of concern for his health, Fry tells him he'll go check them on his own, giving us control and freedom to move around this little village. If you go over and talk to Gurnak again, you'll notice one of his words flashing red. This is the very first instance of a core mechanic of Prisoner. Press triangle and you'll take that word, adding it to your inventory. Interesting. Right off the bat, Prisoner sets a real vibe with this opening. The village of Golden Dawn has a real distinct feel to it. The dreary, muted colors and confined, enclosed spaces, combined with the zoomed-out camera angles, give it this kind of eerie, isolating quality. But what completes it is the music. Oh man, that music. For the first hour of the game or so, exploring the village is the only thing you'll be doing. Seeing the different corners of the village, meeting the different people, and getting accustomed to the game's peculiar dialogue mechanics. Every single NPC in the village is a named, unique character with their own dialogue to offer up, and you can get a bit more out of them with the word system. Some characters will prompt you with a question. You have 3 options that are always present within your inventory: yes, no, and silence. This is enough for yes and no questions, but more nuanced conversations are going to require a wider range of responses to give. And so, in those more nuanced contexts, like when a character is asking you to ask them a question or give a more specific answer, you employ the words you have collected. Using a word uses it up. You'll have to recollect it if you want to use it again. And not only are you collecting words, you can use the joint function to combine 2 topics together. Let's say you head up and talk a bit with the members of the local faith, like Gyn, Vince, or Renfro right here. They're part of staff, a distinctly different social class from Fry's. Fry's father is crew, so Fry is crew. These roles are immutable. You're just born into one or the other. We'll get into the differences between staff and crew in a bit. Through talking with Renfro for a bit, using a few different topics you might have collected, you can get her talking a bit about the world of doubt. Interesting. Let's collect that one. Let's ask her more specifically about it. Through asking, we learn a bit. The world of doubt, it seems, is essentially what the people here call hell. If you plunge into the world of doubt, that means you're dead. Oh hey, the word doubt is flashing red. Shortly after, while talking with Gyn, he mentions the name of our religion, Ensice, which is flashing red, so collect that one. And they're both yellow. If I joint these 2 words together, we get doubt about our teachings. Maybe I ought to keep that one to myself for now. Anyway, you get the general flow. It's an interesting system. Now, what would our teachings be exactly? Well, you know that stuff about staff and crew? They're basically the top and bottom ends of the totem pole. We're crew, so we have 2 paths in life. We've got to pick one once we reach a certain age. We either become Terraners, which are just farmers, or Gunners, who double as local law enforcement and explorers of the dark depths below Golden Dawn. Well, the men can, at least. One of the women comments that roles for women are a bit narrower in this society. That doesn't sound great. Staff have more hazily defined roles. They describe themselves as being here to maintain the social order. Some of them live close to the crew, but more high-ranking members live cordoned off in their own sector to the upper left. If we try to go up there, we'll get a warning from one of the spooky masked priests of their religion. We do not belong up here, I guess. Okay. Renfro, a girl closer to us in age, is the friendliest and most open member of staff we can talk to. Vince is kind of a dick who just complains that the Aliola we cultivate is ill-suited to his refined taste buds, and Gyn is the closest thing we've got to a public-facing leader figure. Odd-looking duck, this one. Something about his eyes. Gives you the willies. All you actually have to do in this opening segment is go check the crops at your farm. You can use the dialogue system to ask people for directions, but it's not too huge of an area to explore either way. Along the way, if you've been wandering around, you've likely bumped into your somewhat uneasy large friend, Porco. He asks if you want to go hang somewhere tomorrow and tells you to go tell your other pal, Rick. Rick is the son of one of the gunner captains, Baron. Telling him about the meetup tomorrow, we decide on meeting up down at the warehouse area. We head home, and Fry's dad makes mention of hoping he heals up soon so he can get back to work, knowing that in just a matter of days, Fry will be undergoing dispose. More odd, cryptic words. I'm sure we'll figure out what that means soon enough. Well, we learn pretty quick, since it's what the boys are talking about as they hang out at the warehouse the next day. You'll pick up what they actually mean by that, asking each other about which paths they're going to choose, Terraner or Gunner. Rick's clearly already set on gunning, Porco's a bit more anxious about what he might be a good fit for, and both of them tell Fry he should ask his and Rick's dad about their respective duties to get an idea for what he might be good for. So we go ask. As Baron is explaining gunner duties, he says it would be better to go ask the man currently tasked with front guard of the village, Boshu, about conditions outside. Boshu's not got much to report, mostly grumbling about having to stand around here all day. But mid-conversation, Rick comes in with well, not a bad look on his face. Everyone in Prisoner only has one portrait, but what he's got to say can't be good. Garnak, our father, has passed away. Vince was there to see him off. He tries to console Fry a bit, telling him that even he wasn't there to see his own father pass. This is, unfortunately, the last bit of characterization Vince will get for the rest of the entire game. Spoilers, I guess. Fry is going to be taken in by Rick's family, his dad Baron and mother Moral, for about a week until his dispose, and in that time we inevitably choose the path of a gunner, which seems to make everyone happy, I guess. From here, we finally exit the opening of Prisoner. We're handed our bow guns, told to remember to mind the safety when we want to talk to someone so we don't accidentally shoot their head off instead, and sent down to the dark depths below to retrieve selenium ore and hand it over to the gunner chief, Baron. He is not kidding about minding the safety either. Baron warns us we've only got one save slot, so we should be careful not to save ourselves into a corner. Like, say, if you, accidentally shoot a guy to death and then get the entire village out to kill you in retribution. Oh god, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. So, we got our first gun. We've descended down into the dark labyrinths below. How does actual combat in Prisoner work? Well, you ever played Smash TV? It's Smash TV. A room-by-room top-down shooter, every room's full of enemies and we gotta blast them. The game has full analog support, but only for movement, not aiming, and there's no aim lock. For the first while, the bow gun is gonna be the only gun you have, and it's bad. Its range is low, it does very low damage, you don't want to use this thing for too long. Thankfully, you don't have to. There are 4 more guns you'll acquire in Prisoner. The pistol, which has longer range and less accurate aiming, but makes up for it with higher damage and eventually upgrades into an SMG. The laser gun, which has very long range, very steady aim, and very high damage, and eventually upgrades into something completely absurd I've only seen in Japanese gameplay recordings because I completely missed it. The flamethrower, which does what it says on the tin. It's both your best friend and greatest foe. Beware the flames in Prisoner. Beware the flames. And the rocket launcher, which is exactly what it claims to be. Its ammo is the rarest, but it has the highest damage per shot. If that wasn't enough, you've got 3 handy grenade types you'll be collecting. Regular grenades, which have moderate damage output and a wide blast radius. Incendiary grenades, which do what they say on the tin, and flashbangs, which can both erase certain types of enemy projectiles and stun some enemies. If you spam flashbangs enough, they can fully immobilize enemies for a while, though you won't have a reason to do this for quite a while. Grenades can be either invaluable or kind of useless. They can be thrown over obstacles your guns can't fire through, but they also bounce off walls, and the arc of the bounce is, non-existent. Even if thrown at an angle, they'll just bounce right back at you. You can't be hit by your own grenades, so sometimes you'll utilize this to hit enemies too close to hit with the regular arc of your throw, so that's kind of handy, but it makes them much harder to use for hitting enemies behind annoying corners, which will become a bigger and bigger issue as you get deeper into the game. Weapons can be swapped with L1 and grenades with L2. You don't have to equip anything, it's snappy, and you really shouldn't be afraid to use all your guns and nades. They have limited ammo, but that ammo is very plentiful. You'll get more from clearing rooms, and they tend to reward you with a whole lot, way more than you'll spend on clearing enemies. The shooting as a whole is, fine. It's serviceable. There are things that feel good about it, but it's hardly what I'd call the main draw. You'll also occasionally get band-aids and medkits, which don't take up space in your main inventory. They have their own menu, which is nice. Medkits are full heals, so you'll want to stock those up. Despite collecting selenium ore being our stated goal, you don't actually have to do that, and you shouldn't. It adds a lot more backtracking. No, Baron hinted at what our real objective in the game is just before we set out, mentioning that somewhere, very deep down below, there is said to be a village of rebels, Every time you collect a piece of ore, Fry will make sure to remind us that Baron also told us one of the duties of a gunner is to explore the dark corners below. So, let's explore. Deeper. And deeper. So deep. So deep it actually does get scary. Things don't stop from here. They will never stop. The depths of Prisoner feel truly endless. As mentioned, Prisoner is a room-by-room game as we descend floor by floor, searching for the staircase down to the next floor. Every floor spreads out into its own maze of rooms and hallways. Floors will have locked doors that require keys or switches to open. Simple enough, and it does all start out very simple. You can also pull up a map at the upper right corner of the screen by pressing square, and you're going to want this thing up basically all the time. You're never going to hide it if you know what's good for you. Key items, like the card keys, take up space in your inventory. The same space as the words you collected from dialogue earlier. Selenium ore also takes up space, though it's surprisingly enough not really a key item. In fact, this stuff is sort of worthless. At least I never got a use out of it. If you go back and deliver ore, you'll get to take a brief rest at your home and recover your health, but it gets you no closer to progressing. So, once again, we simply march further downward. After a while, we hit floor B6, where Rick and Porco are waiting for us. They comment that they haven't been able to find much ore since we've snatched up most of it, and there's some weird switches ahead they can't figure out, so they're heading back up. Maybe there's something to get if you go back up here, but that meant walking back through 5 floors, and I wanted to see that rebel village down below. So I kept going. It's around here where Prisoner starts to show its true colors a bit. B6 is our first real multi-switch puzzle. There are 8 rooms, 4 outer and 4 inner, with an elevator and a 9th room in the middle. This elevator room is also where you get the laser gun. The inner 4 have strange generators, and the outer 4 have switches. It's a bit confusing at first, but you'll probably figure this one out eventually. Only one switch in the outer rooms can be active. That switch will open the corresponding inner room. Once inside that room, you need to blast the generator. Blast all 4, and you'll destroy this cable, making it climbable and opening a path forward, crawling through this huge system of vents. A little bit annoying with the back and forth, but not an awful puzzle. At the end of this long, winding path, Fry finds himself in what feels like another world entirely. A serene, grassy pathway with sky-patterned wallpaper, leading into a much more familiar, modern living space, a real far cry from the dingy, decrepit tents he's used to. It exits out to a hallway of 5 doors, with some others you can enter. Nothing to do in here, just another room, exactly the same as the one you just passed through. Following the only path forward from here leads us to one more elevator, and this one is actually functional. We could write it down. Be warned though, once you get on that elevator, there's no going back. If you want to go talk to anyone at Golden Dawn to go use and collect those words for a bit, this is going to be your last opportunity. Things get intense from here on out. We're stuck. The elevator's crashed down, stranding Fry alone 20 floors below anyone who would even know his name. We've got no way back up. The only way forward is further down. 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 Down into the darkest depths, down deeper than anyone's ever been before. We're already down beyond the point of being rescued. We fell down without anyone even knowing where we went, where we are, how deep down we've gone. So down is the only direction left, deeper and deeper down into the absolute core of our world, down into a world filled with nothing but peril, monsters and machines trying to tear us apart. None of those words we collected will do us any good here. Nothing down here is looking for a conversation. It's kill or be killed down here, and down is the only way we will go. And the deeper down you get, the more labyrinthine, the more obtuse the floor layouts get, the more devious and time-consuming the puzzles are. Small issues with the gameplay, with load times between rooms, with winding level layouts and puzzle design will become your arch-enemy by this point. You're going to learn to hate how items only spawning when you've cleared rooms forces you to clear every single room just because, to be clear, the game does not tell you what items are hidden in a room. It could be ammo, it could be healing. Worst case, it could be a key. You have no way of knowing, and thus must kill everything in sight to ensure you do not miss anything. I did this, and I still missed some things. Also, as useful as that map is, it only accounts for the floor you're on. That's right, baby, multi-floor puzzles. They exist in Prisoner, and you will come to loathe them. There's no actual map menu screen to flip through these on, so have fun when you need to take them into account. Oh my god, this is jumping ahead a bit, but I need to talk about it. I need to talk about the worst floor of Prisoner. I need to talk about the worst puzzle in the entire game. It's towards the end, and it absolutely defines my worst experiences with the game. There is a part of Prisoner where you need to gather key items, all tucked away in 6 different rooms. Halfway through Prisoner, the game introduces and really picks up a scary fixation on these bridge rooms. Bridge rooms, as they may sound, consist of one bridge with 2 balconies on the unconnected sides. When a bridge room appears, it tends to be connected to a switch that rotates it, forcing you to navigate areas by rotating bridges to line up to connect to certain rooms. No, the map doesn't tell you which rooms the bridge is connecting to. The game does tell you what rooms the switch is affecting. It does not tell you how it is affecting them. On this floor. On this goddamn floor, alright? There are 9 bridges. The 6 rooms you need to access are on the upper and left sides. You can access from the lower and right. There are 3 switches below the bridges that control the bridge alignments. Each switch has 3 buttons. Each button changes the alignment of the bridge above and the 2 to the upper right from there. The upper rooms are kind of annoying to reach with this, but fine. It's doable, it just takes a bit of time. The leftmost ones, though. Oh, God. So the items you need are not actually in the rooms to the left. No, those rooms have switches, toggle switches. The doors you access from the right to get to the bridge paths have locks. One door is always locked. Which door is locked is controlled by this 4th multi-switch in a room to the right of there. This switch also controls the locks on 3 other doors. Each switch unlocks one of the 3. Every time you change the locks, all the toggle switches reset. So what this means is you can't hit all 3, you can't toggle all 3 at once. That's not what you're supposed to do. You need to toggle the 2 available on the current configuration and then go to the room unlocked in that configuration and hit a switch in there that only activates when the 2 toggle switches available on the current configuration are toggled on. Can you see? Can you see where we're going? Can you see where I'm going with this? Can you see what birthed my pain? Rarely have I felt so fatigued with a game as I did with Prisoner after several uninterrupted hours of this. No characters, no dialogue, the only scraps of story coming from these text logs you pick up on occasion. Eventually, you'll bump into a boss fight and think, wow, this must be the end, right? If there's a boss fight here, surely the story will resume soon after I beat it. Okay. Alright then. Guess we're still doing this. Once you finally hit floor 30, after 10 floors of endless fighting, destruction and fire, so much fire, so much burning and screaming and death, so unceremoniously, you meet a girl under attack by monsters. Holy shit, an actual character, a person! And it only took 3 hours out of this 10-hour long game. Wow! Hopefully you do not accidentally kill her with one of the many weapons of mass destruction you've collected during your traversal. And from this point, basically, is spoilers, so if you want to experience the story of Prisoner yourself, skip ahead. Let's double back a bit to talk about those text logs. They're fragments of reports from mysterious individuals that detail the history of a ship voyage gone wrong. The first ones you find are the crew reports from an unknown crew member. At some point, the captain of the ship just sort of lost it. He called off whatever mission the ship was supposed to carry out, but he also denied the crew's requests to go home, for some reason furious at their insubordination. From there, it all descended into civil war between him and the chief. Split into separate factions, the captain leveraged the security systems to wipe out his opposition, while the chief's side burrowed several floors down in the ship, unleashing several experimental bioorganic creatures housed within to combat the security drones. In the end, it was a decisive victory for the captain's faction. And now we basically have the general history for how things got this way. So, with all that out of the way, who is this girl? Her name is Poricia, and she is blind. Her father's fallen sick, and she came out here in search of herbs to cure him. But on account of her blindness, she got lost and hasn't been able to find her way back home. So Fry decides to stick with her and keep her safe while they navigate their way back to her place. And what Fry deduces to be the lost rebel village Baron told him about is in fact another one of those much cleaner, more put-together living spaces he previously found. A much bigger chunk of it this time, complete with an old-fashioned church. It's got a pond, a library, even a tennis court. We head over to Policia's home, one of those little rooms, and find her father, Pfizer, sick in bed, barely even able to move. The man seems to have accepted that he doesn't have much time left, and upon hearing we're from Golden Dawn, says he's lived his life to carry on and impart truth and knowledge of great import about the world, and wants to tell us before he loses his life. This is the first time in several hours you'll get to play with the dialogue system again, using different responses to get different topics to ask him about, and things to mention about the society you grew up in for him to comment on. What Pfizer has to say generally lines up with the old journals we've been picking up. The biggest thing you'll probably see coming is what he has to say about our world. It is, in fact, a giant ship, though nobody here even knows what a ship is, apparently. Not even Pfizer. He only knows it as the word that describes our world. We can learn a bit about Beirack itself. Mirroring the captain who rules over Golden Dawn, Beirack had the mayor. Unlike the captain, whose origins of selection or of rights of secession, Beirack selected mayors through democratic election, a system they felt held great value. Apparently, Beirack's writings even explicitly claim that peaceful society cannot be maintained through secession, though Pfizer comments that Fry being here and having no news of revolts happening within his own village might show that Beirack's own writings are not entirely correct. Maybe speaking too soon on that one, brother. The biggest way our cultures diverge is in Beirack's idea of crew. In Beirack, the crew aren't understood to be a social class, they're just what everyone was in the old days. The idea of staff was something the captain invented for his own ends. In truth, we are all crew, and before things got bad, things weren't so bad between us. Finally, we learn about the bridge of the ship. Beirack selected this spot to build their home specifically to keep the bridge safe. Sadly, over the years, the people of the village fell victim to deadly disease, and that's why it's just Poricia and her father here now. In order to learn the whole truth, Pfizer tells Fry to go down below with Poricia to talk to the ship's computer, opening the secret path down through the library. After a bit more blasting, just a bit, to get to this bridge, and after remarking on similarities in architecture to the upper areas of his home village, Fry and Poricia get a clear window out into the world beyond the ship, and witness a dark sea dotted with strange lights, the reaches of outer space. Suddenly, a robotic voice calls their attention. It introduces itself as SOLG-721, who I'll be calling Solg, the main computer of the starship, Golden Dawn. It explains that the computer we're accessing is a databank of the ship's history, urging Fry to ask it some questions. If we ask it about Beirack, it'll respond that Beirack was the name of a person. Born in the space year 128, he graduated from Theodore Spaceflight College in 148 with very good grades, and took up a position as drive head on this ship the year after, eventually being promoted to drive chief in the year 160. In 169, he requested the captain recall the ship and head home, and was designated a mutineer for it. He died in 186 in the second living area. Guess we just got a technical rundown of the entire history of Beirack, both the village and the guy. There's plenty of other questions you can ask the big computer. For example, if you still have some selenium ore, you can place it down on its scanner, where it'll remark on it possessing a purity level of 62.3, and that it was most commonly used for the lasers ships used to destroy asteroids in their path. Or you could ask it about the Golden Dawn's own history, finishing construction in 147 and launching out from the natural satellite Nereid Dawn, though most importantly, we learn its specific function. The Golden Dawn is an immigration vessel, built to visit 5 locations designated as holding potential to sustain human life. Once they located a suitable planet, they would then be carried out to begin the colonization process in the shuttle WS-147. This prompts Solg to do a scan of the ship's function, giving the worrying status report that its operational effectiveness has been lowered to 15%. The only systems still active are life support and autopilot. It strongly recommends preparing to carry out an investigation on our final target destination, Sigma 1892. Fry understandably gets a bit freaked out at all this wild new information that's flipping his whole world upside down. But Solg explains it can't really answer any of why the world's turned out like this in the past 150 years. Given where his last bits of data come from, those 150 years might start somewhere near the end of the 190s. We're somewhere in deep space year 340 to 350, baby. What Solg can tell us is that in 2 weeks and 2 days, we'll be approaching the last planet on our ship's itinerary. All 4 of the other planets turned out unsuitable. If we don't make a home there, the ship's automatically going to begin its return trip back to Earth. And by Solg's own estimations in the ship's current state of disrepair, its chances of making it back are a big round 0. We're 4.34 light years away, and the ship only has enough power to begin a journey back that would take approximately 259 years. Optimistically, we've got our deadline. We either immigrate to this new planet, or we just kinda starve to death. Fry would rather pick the option where the weird space diseases that kill him could at least be novel ones. We head back to Pfizer, fully believing everything he showed us. Alas, the man's candle has finally burnt out. Fry and Poricia hold a funeral, and Fry determines all he can do is try to take Poricia home, keep her safe, hopefully hide her from fanatic villagers who might want to kill her for being a rebel, and if we're really lucky, convince people to get off the slowly decaying death vessel and break out of the toxic social order constraining their lives. Thankfully, after some sewer sharking, right next to Beirack, we finally find an elevator with a working up button, finding our way back to familiar peace and, safety? Climbing up out of the trapdoor in the warehouse, Fry manages to hide Poricia and lay low long enough to get over to Rick's house and ask him to give them some cover for a bit. Initially reluctant, Rick ends up accepting and telling them his mom's going to be out for a while as she's taking care of a sick neighbor. He can't imagine leaving a blind girl like Poricia out high and dry anyway. This, unfortunately, backfires. The tribunal comes for us in the night, angrily shouting Fry's name and telling us to bring out the rebel. Rick's mom, who he thought would be out watching over a sick neighbor, ended up ratting us out. Even Baron has no mercy for us. This situation could not be more rotten. All that's left is for us to face the trial. For 4 days, Fry begs, pleads. All he wants is for people to listen. The first trial is presided over by Priest Egan. He doesn't listen. The second trial is presided over by our old friend Renfro, who urges us to say anything to clear our name, telling Fry it's not completely set in stone that he's a traitor just yet. She seems to take Fry's words a bit more into account, but the third day of trial, Gein. He, too, seems a bit more convinced by Fry's words, but rather than show concern, he smiles. The fourth and final day, and our judge is the mysterious Captain, a strange and crooked-looking old man. More than anything, he shows a creepy sort of excitement over seeing a new rebel for the first time in a long while, and stares for a concerningly long amount of time at Poricia. As Fry gives his speech, the speech he's given so many times before, the captain barely responds, until he starts making, weird noises. Suddenly, the captain's face twists and he makes a proclamation. It's come. It's descended! A new will has descended from the heavens down into my head! A new will from the Ensice! He commands the priests to write down this new piece of Holy Testament, the new teaching. Being one from outside the village does not necessarily make one a rebel. This being, Poricia, is their savior, who will rescue the village, and she is, in 2 days' time, to, come to his room. You and Fry, for his mischievous, nonsensical ramblings of the coming end of the world, is to be branded a rebel and punished with disassembly. Uh-oh. Mercilessly tossed into jail. Hey, it's the first time we've been in prison and prisoner. Fry and Poricia await whatever dark things the people of Golden Dawn have in store for them. Fry coming to fully realize how artificial, how twisted and cruel the world he's lived in was. Poricia observes that none of the people in the staff, not even the captain, truly seem to believe in their teachings. All she has to go off of is vibes, but the vibes here are truly rancid. Suddenly, Renfro comes in with the save. She pops her cells open and announces the glorious revolution. Gein has made his move. He's overthrowing the captain and his corrupt regime. All we have to do is head to the warehouse and rendezvous with him. Gotta be careful of all the crazed, angry gunners out for blood on the way there, though. When we meet up with Gein, we've got good news and bad news. The good news is the revolution was a success. The bad news is Gein's not much better than the old captain. He does plan on investigating more of the world outside the village, but Fry's continued existence is not a part of any of those plans. We're a bit too inconvenient for him, so he's going to have us shot and killed here if we don't mind. Guess we're going on the run again, and not far into running we meet our old friend, Boshu, the former gate guard. The new caps put out a little hit on our heads, and all the gunners are out to collect. He's not letting us leave. For the first time, we've got no choice but to kill a man. With his dying breath, he urges Fry to keep moving forward. And from here, remember what I said about this game having a very weird ratio of combat to story? That was it. That was basically the last major chunk of story. Almost the entire rest of the game is shooting. And more shooting. And more shooting. Occasionally a very long and arduous puzzle. You do have human enemies to fight now, and they're, annoying. Get used to using fire because you basically need it to make them less of a pain to fight. You know, for a village implied to have a population of like 40 people, I'm pretty sure across the rest of this game, Fry kills more people than most FPS game protagonists. Like, they had a closet somewhere full of like 800 angry dudes with flamethrowers all out to murder children. I think Fry could qualify to be a Musou game protagonist by the end of this. Along the way, you collect 2 new different types of log entry. One's from the captain and one's from Chief Beirack. Through Beirack's logs, we learn about the deterioration of morale among the crew, how the specific reason their attempts to colonize failed were, in a surprisingly egalitarian reasons, because those planets were determined to be inhabited by a form of life far enough into its development that settling there would, I guess, be too unethical. And ultimately the actions they took in an attempt to protest and get the captain to head home, a steady slide down from hoping the captain would come to his senses and listen to them knowing they were the only people who know how to maintain and operate the ship, that turns into utter despair when they realize the captain doesn't even care about the mission anymore, which prompts the captain's side of the story. The man, starting out with the best of intentions, well and truly lost his mind. Whether it was the desperation of things weighing down on him, succumbing to dementia, or just good old-fashioned power mania, the moment his crew started disobeying him, he just went bananas and started having them slaughtered. By the end of his logs, he makes it clear he has no interest in completing the mission anymore. He's isolated everyone, invented his own religion, forced us back to the old ways of living to conserve resources, and discarded any concept of finding a long-term solution, with the excuse that if things go the best they possibly could with this plan, they could survive for at least 1,000 years. Good argument, my man. Once you finally push through the next several hours of this, Fry runs into his old buddies, Rick and Porco. While they're technically part of the kill team, they're not trying to kill us. In fact, they tag along for a bit. This is one of the more darkly comical bits of the game, actually. Porco wants to come along, but he's also convinced we think he'll just get in the way. And if you try telling him he won't, he gets angry and accuses you of lying until you finally just say yes, but that we'll do our best to keep him safe anyway. Poor Porco kinda just gets treated like crap. Unfortunately, they don't tag along to do or say much. Our party doesn't really exist. It's basically all just Fry running around solo killing dudes even after that. The one snag is when we get to the shuttle. We need 3 things to actually write it down into the atmosphere. Enough food, enough water, and some valid IDs. The keys to the relevant areas and some unregistered IDs are in a room just across from here, so let's grab those and get going. I'm sure this won't take long. Getting the IDs is a lot easier, and has basically the last interesting bit of text in the game. After Fry gets the IDs registered, you can keep talking to the computer and ask it about why this whole immigration voyage was commenced in the first place, and he gets a pretty direct answer. Seems like around space year 147, resources on Earth were drying up. The point of our voyage was to get us somewhere newer, fresher, where we could keep things going a bit longer. Fry asks if we could re-establish contact with Earth once we're set up, but Sog says we're far beyond telecommunications range, so even in the best case, we're totally cut off. Which prompts one interesting question from Fry. How are the people from Earth even going to get on after this? They've got no resources left at this point, right? Well, that's an interesting wrinkle. According to Sog, the answer to the whole conundrum came along in space year 192, just a scant 25 years or so after the whole revolution thing. Humanity just found a newer, better power source. So, to recap, we headed out 200 to 250 years ago to resolve a resource crisis that was then resolved 50 years later, after our captain went insane about people not sticking to the mission until he ended up dropping the mission himself, and now we're locked into a psycho pseudo-religious manipulation chamber full of evil puppet masters who want to abuse and murder children and the people drinking their Kool-Aid. Fry's life is one very strange and particular and sad joke. And then, I don't know, we shoot some big bosses and the game ends. No, I'm not excluding a ton of stuff that happens in between. The game literally just ends with you shooting a giant one-eyed piece of shit that shoots laser beams. I recommend just throwing grenades at it from behind, and otherwise staying on the sides and shooting it with the RPG when you run out of those, instead of risking shooting at it from the front. Its hitbox extends down a bit, so you can find some pretty consistent spots to hit it from. Once you've got all the stuff, you really do just, get on the shuttle, and the game ends. I didn't get the perfect good end, so Rick and Porco stayed behind. Apparently I screwed myself out of that by first responding to Rick's question when you meet up with him earlier about whether you know what you're doing with yes, and that just perma-locked me out of saving him and Porco. So, that's cool? I don't know. Just from looking up footage, it doesn't seem like the good ending actually addresses any of the things that bother me about the last one-third of the game. It doesn't give you a ton more character interaction, not with Gein or Vince or Renfro or Baron, who just disappear from the story, and not even with any of our escapee group. And what bugs me about this ending is I really just have not been given enough reason to care about anyone. Sure, I guess I care about Fry and Poricia, but not that much, because Poricia hasn't gotten to, do anything. Rick and Porco are only slightly more defined, but okay, Porco honestly isn't really. Him saying he has to stay behind because there's still people he cares about here is just funny to me. The plot made it unavoidable to learn about Rick's family, but I never once heard anything about Porco having friends or family besides us, really. I just did not learn about his character at all. So, I don't know. It's hard for me not to feel like this ending is just kind of the game sputtering out. Prisoner presented a lot of cool ideas and some cool sequences, but after a point, it really lost what grabbed me about it, and once I hit credits, I just didn't feel much at all, personally. Whenever characters are actually talking, whenever there's dialogue, whenever story is happening, Prisoner is pretty great. It's got a really unique vibe, beautiful music, cool aesthetics. Even the core gameplay is not bad. As far as I can tell, the composer of this game, Nobuko Miyauchi, only ever scored this odd set of Faycraft originals. And that's a bit of a shame, because the music is phenomenally good. The problem, the thing that really turns me off about Prisoner is just the game in between all this stuff. You can't imagine how hyped I was seeing that whole opening segment. Getting to play with those weird dialogue mechanics. Dude, I was so excited to play a game that's had such a distinct, rich atmosphere, such a standout, strong vision, such cool themes, some unique gameplay concepts. I wanted to spend so long messing with weird dialogue mechanics and interacting with odd characters. It is, to date, the only game to really start giving me the same vibes as Elemental Gimmick gear for Dreamcast. So imagine my disappointment when Prisoner barely has characters, when you barely get to interact with anyone, when entire dudes with portraits exist who seem like they'll be a big part of it and then just appear once and exit the plot forever, never having made as much of an impact as it feels like they should have. I can't call Prisoner bad. I think there's enough here. I just wish there was more. I wish the game zeroed in on its strengths better. I wish the combat and exploration was less monotonous and the story more developed, more exciting, more characterful. I'm honestly, if nothing else, very sad that none of these people worked on a major original project again. 'Cause shit, man, I'd play it. They got real close here. They do have 2 other prior games, so who knows? Maybe someday we'll see what's up with those 2. I don't know if I have the energy for it right now, though. As mentioned, this game received a full fan translation while I was making this video, so if anything about it seems interesting to you, enough to make you want to play it yourself, well, you can go do that. Once again, thanks for putting that out, Chapu. I seriously, absolutely did not expect it to happen. Anyway, see you later. I'm sure we'll meet again under brighter and more whimsical conditions next time.